All right, welcome to the show. This is going to be a solo episode today, and I'm going to be talking about a topic that has been on the mind of a lot of people from the second half of this year, and that has been America's relationship with race. Because throughout this year, we've been having a national conversation about the history of America and how race factors into that. And just this year, a number of states have taken steps to rectifying that history. Mississippi, for example, is just voted for a new state flag. The state of Rhode Island just dropped its name and Providence Plantations from its name, so it's now just the state of Rhode Island. And Alabama is now going to fix its constitution in the coming couple of years. It is the only state since the end of Reconstruction that has not done that, or so since it's the only state since the end of the Jim Crow period that has not fixed its constitution, and it is very much going to do that in the next couple of years. But we often forget that when we talk about Confederate memorials all across the United States itself maintains several Confederate memorials, and they are the 10 Army bases that are named after Confederate generals. Camp Beauregard near Pineville, Louisiana. It's a Louisiana National Guard base, which is named after PGT Beauregard. Fort Benning near Columbus, Georgia, which is named after Brigadier General Henry L. Benning. Fort Bragg in North Carolina, named for Braxton Bragg. Fort Gordon near Grovertown, Georgia, named for John Brown Gordon. Fort A.P. Hill near Bowling Green, Virginia, which is named for the Confederate Lieutenant General A.P. Hill. Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas, named after Confederate General John Bell Hood. And that has been in the news for a lot this year because of the rampant sexual harassment that has been taking place at that base. Fort Lee near Prince George County, Virginia, which is named after Robert E. Lee. Fort Pickett near Blackstone, Virginia. That's a Virginia National Guard base named after George Pickett. Fort Polk near Leesville, Louisiana, named after Reverend Leonidas Polk, and who is also a Confederate general. And Fort Rucker in Dale County, Alabama, which is named after Confederate Colonel Edmund Rucker, who was an acting brigadier general during the Civil War. And in my opinion, the fact that the United States maintains bases named after people who were in effect committing armed insurrection against the United States has always baffled me. But I personally think, and legislation but I personally think that they should be renamed. And legislation to that effect was passed this year in Congress, but Trump vetoed it. And a number of Republicans like Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton have characterized this as, quote unquote, canceling the Confederacy. But in my opinion, it's very different from statues like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who were the founding fathers of the United States. These people are, in my opinion, there should be no dispute regarding, whether these people's intentions were to lead an armed insurrection against the United States for the purpose of preserving slavery. And so I personally think that there are plenty of people who are much more worthy of having these bases named after them. And I'd just like to talk about some of them right now. So here are 10 people who these 10 bases named for Confederate generals should be named after instead. Number 1, Charles L. Thomas. Major Thomas was a first lieutenant in the Second World War when he volunteered to lead the 3rd Platoon, C Company, 614th Tank Destroyer Battalion to capture the village of Kleimbach, a strategically important location 5 miles from the German border. And despite being wounded, he helped his men out of his damaged vehicle and refused to be evacuated until the situation was under control. Then Major Thomas was among 7 other African-American soldiers from around this time who were awarded the Medal of Honor by President Bill Clinton in 1997, six of whom were awarded it posthumously, and he was one of them. In my opinion, Fort Rucker should be renamed Fort Thomas. Number 2, Reuben Rivers. On November 16th, 1944, Sergeant Rivers was wounded when his tank hit a mine. Despite the wound's infection and orders to evacuate, he refused to do so. And when his unit came under heavy fire, he gave his life by drawing German fire onto him to cover the other soldiers' withdrawal. He was awarded the Silver Star at his death and the Medal of Honor again in 1997. Fort Hood should be renamed Fort Rivers. Number 3, John R. Fox. On December 6, 1944, First Lieutenant Fox was volunteered to stay behind in the Italian village of Somocolonia when German soldiers forced American troops out. He ordered artillery to fire on the enemy even while he was in the line of fire. He was killed, but this act allowed the Americans enough time to strike back and force the Germans out. Fort Bragg should be renamed Fort Fox. Number 4, George Watson. On March 8th, 1943, Private Watson was stationed near Porlock, causing a fire. Everyone was ordered to abandon ship, but he assisted other soldiers getting to the rafts until he was weakened by his exertions and drowned. His body was never recovered, but he was the first Black American soldier in the Second World War to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. Fort Benning should be renamed Fort Watson. Number 5, Willie F. James Jr. On April 7th, 1945, James was scouting to help plan an attack on an enemy bridgehead near Lippoldsburg, Germany. Machine gun fire pinned him down for more than an hour before he returned. Later, his platoon leader was hit by a German sniper, and when he rushed to his aid, he too was struck down by machine gun fire. And again, he like everyone I've talked about so far, received the Medal of Honor in 1997 by President Bill Clinton. Fort Polk should be renamed Fort James. Number 6, Edward A. Carter Jr. On March 3rd, 1945, Carter's tank was hit by a German missile. He then ran through an open field before being forced to take cover. Despite being wounded 5 times, he killed 6 German soldiers and captured 2, who provided valuable information to the American forces. Later on after the war, a false Red Scare allegation denied him re-enlistment in 1949. But again, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 1997. Fort A.P. Hill should be renamed Fort Carter. Some of these I didn't choose for specific reasons. Some were chosen because the person was from this place, but others were a bit more random. Number 7, Vernon Baker. First Lieutenant Baker was initially turned away when he tried to enlist in 1944, being told, quote, "We have no quotas for you people." But 2 months later, he successfully enlisted. In June of 1944, he was wounded in the arm in Naples and hospitalized for 2 months. Then in April 1945, he led a 2-day assault on a German mountain stronghold, personally taking out 3 enemy machine guns. After the war, he served another 4 combined decades in both the Army and the American Red Cross. He, along with everyone I've talked about so far, was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Bill Clinton on January 13th, 1997. And in my opinion, Fort Pickett should be renamed Fort Baker. Now for the last 3. Number 8, Medgar Evers. Evers was born in Decatur, Mississippi, and he served 2 years during the Second World War, fighting in the Battle of Normandy. He then returned to Mississippi, where he became a civil rights icon and a civil rights activist, and he challenged segregation, particularly at his alma mater, the University of Mississippi. Tragically, he was assassinated in 1963, and the perpetrator was not convicted until more than 30 years later. And in my opinion, Camp Beauregard should be renamed Camp Evers. Number 9, Bud Day. Colonel Bud Day served in the Korean and Vietnam Wars and was a prisoner of war. And he is to this day the only person ever to be awarded both the Medal of Honor and the Air Force Cross. and is the most decorated soldier since Douglas MacArthur, who led the American charge in the Korean War. And a lot of people have heard of Colonel Day's story, but I just want to talk about it very briefly. On August 26, 1967, Colonel Day was shot down over Hanoi. And when he ejected from the aircraft, he fractured his right arm in 3 different places and also injured his eyes and back. And unable to contact a rescue helicopter, he was captured by the North Vietnamese. He then escaped and then was captured again by the Viet Cong and returned to where he was initially taken to, tortured, beaten, and starved. And he shared a cell with John McCain. And he was not released until 1973. And in my opinion, Fort Gordon should be renamed Fort Day. And finally, number 10, John McCain. John McCain's story has been famous for a long time. He was a United States Senator for over 30 years from his state of Arizona, but his story as a war hero is also very famous. But I want to talk about it very briefly because he served in the Vietnam War, and he was shot down over Hanoi exactly 2 months later, after Colonel Day. And when he ejected from his aircraft, he fractured both of his arms and a leg, and he nearly drowned when he parachuted into a lake. When the North Vietnamese recovered him, they took him and crushed his shoulder with a rifle butt and bayoneted him. His captors beat and interrogated him and refused to treat his injuries when he was taken to the hospital. He lost 50 pounds in that hospital, and he spent 2 years in solitary confinement. At a certain point, he was offered early release in order for his captors to get propaganda appearances of being merciful. And that offer he refused because of not only because he wanted to deny the North Vietnamese the propaganda value, but because of an honor code where prisoners of war had to be released in the exact order that they were captured. And it was not until March 14th, 1973, that he and Colonel Day and a number of others were released. And John McCain is often the right often really loves to hate on him for reasons I'm not sure why. They call him a rhino. I remember very well Kelly Ward's run against John McCain for the Senate, and how just a few months after John McCain's death, Kelly Ward would then go on to become the chair of the Arizona GOP, a position she still holds, where she has overseen the loss of both the state to Joe Biden and their last remaining Senate seat to Democrat Mark Kelly. But anyway, John McCain, in my opinion, represents an era of politics that is long gone at the moment. And compare that to Colonel Day, where he did participate in a Swift Boat Veterans for Truth ad against John Kerry. John McCain, that was something that John McCain did not support. So John McCain represents an era of civility, an era of work, of actually getting things done. Whether or not we conservatives would like everything that was in the bills that he supported, I think that he represents an era that I think that America is sorely in need of right now, because we're hating on each other. We're mocking others based on and we're refusing to talk to them or do business with them based on the party they support. But John McCain, represents an era of reaching across the aisle and trying to cultivate relationships with everyone, and not just as a politician, but also in his experience as a war hero. And that is why, in my opinion, Fort Lee should be renamed Fort McCain. Anyway, really enjoyed doing this episode, and I hope the next time that this is taken up by Congress, that this actually ends up passing. Anyway, have a great rest of the day.